Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends. Welcome to day 4 of official Masters 25 previews. As you can see from the title card here, we have at least one spicy rare to talk about. And we have a lot of other great cards too. As usual, we will recap everything that's been previewed over the last 24 hours and give some quick analysis. Now, before we get started, if you're looking for a way to support what we do here, just check out the description below. You'll find a few ways, one of which is our Patreon page that's linked below. You'll also find a link to products on Amazon, including Masters 25, but anything you pick up on Amazon, once you go through that first link, we'll get a small percentage that helps the channel. And then finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. You can save some cash. They're offering Masters 25 pre-orders, as well as many other things. So these are all ways you can help support what we do here. And as always, thank you. With that being said, let's get into it. Akroma, Angel of Wrath. This is one of our mythics, and maybe not too surprising since we saw the other Akroma, the red one, and this is the original one, so why not? It does feel like there's a little bit of an Akroma theme going on in this set. They use the art from the vault. I mean, as far as value goes, this card is not very expensive. You can pick up the original or Time Spiral versions for about $4 or $5. Some of the other variants might be slightly more, but that's about it. So it has a little value, not a ton of it. As far as playability goes, there are various ways to cheat this thing into play that we've seen already, some more that we'll see today. So if you do happen to pick it up at the mythic spot, say in a draft, there's probably at least a way for you to get into play without trying to hardcast this thing. Casually, it's a fun card, not something that you see in a lot of competitive decks or anything like that. So you could argue, again, maybe another low-value mythic, but I definitely see the nostalgic value in this card for the set. Cloud Shift from Evanston Restored. This actually has never been reprinted. It's a common, nothing really major about the card. It's just a flicker card, but it's really cheap, just 1 to cast, instant speed. And you can find a lot of creative things to do with these typically in your limited games. We're going to see some cards today even that interact well with it, so I'm sure there's always going to be good targets for it in your sealed and draft. Luminarch Ascension. This is from Zendikar. I actually remember this from my pre-release. I had it. I went 3-0-1. I don't know how I remember this, but it was really because of this card that won me those games. Really good in limited. It even every once in a while will show up in a Legacy Control deck, but this is really more of a casual card, good in Commander and such. And because of that, it's got a decent price behind it, around $7. Not a bad rare. Renewed Faith. This is a common. This was originally from Onslaught, but it's actually maybe a little familiar to you because it was in Amonkhet. So it's currently in Standard. Sometimes it shows up in Standard sideboards even. And the card is going to be good and limited to deal with maybe more aggressive decks. And a lot of times it will come out of the sideboard, obviously. But if you do main deck it, you're not really punished because you have the cycling ability on top of it, which is actually kind of awesome. It makes this a decent card for sure. One thing I do want to point out, it's got new art. And the emblem that you see in the art is actually on the packs of Dominaria, I think on one of the shields. So maybe this card actually is in Dominaria as well, or maybe they just use the symbol in the art. Rest in Peace. Awesome inclusion here. This really could use the reprint. It's not super expensive yet. These cards will run you about $7, $8. The only reason they're as low as they are is because Return to Ravnica, where this was originally printed, actually the only time it was printed, was a set that had a pretty big print run. It was one of the times in the history of the game where the game was probably at its highest when it comes to engagement and packs being open. And even though they don't release those type of numbers, my assumption is that may have been the best-selling Magic set of all time, just from my observations. Now, there's a lot of copies of this still floating around, but it would be not too long before this card broke the $10 mark, considering it sees extensive play in so many formats. Fantastic sideboard card for Vintage, Legacy, as well as Modern, not to mention other casual formats and such. Awesome idea to get this thing reprinted before it crosses like that $10 and then $15 and then $20 threshold. Accumulated Knowledge. They went back to the original art on this one. Not a lot to say about it. In draft, you probably don't want to necessarily just play one of these, but if you can draft a few of them, it's actually a pretty decent card. And it does see play in Pauper, and sometimes even shows up in Legacy and Vintage. Exclude. This gets some new art, and it actually looks pretty sweet. It's a Phyrexian Rager that's being excluded here, so instead of you getting to draw a card, now I'm going to get to draw the card, basically is what the art's telling me. And not to mention, we get some really sweet flavor text here. Terrifying, but thankfully temporary. Not easy to save too fast either, so anyway, really cool inclusion. This is bumped up to uncommon, which I think is fine because you get counterspell at common in this set. So this is a very good card. It only impacts creature spells, but having the cantrip for 3, especially considering it's only 1 blue, is kind of awesome. And this card does see some pauper play too. Not a super expensive card, but nice inclusion for the limited game, if nothing else. Pact of Negation. Awesome, awesome inclusion at rare here. This is not a cheap card. This was reprinted in Modern Masters, of course, originally from Future Sight. And other than the invocation that we got a little while ago, those are your only options to pick this card up, which basically means it's not a cheap card because it does see a lot of play, especially in Modern, like Ad Nauseam decks and many others too. So this will run you about $31, $32 typically at this point. And if you wanted a foil, you're going to be spending a little bit of cash. That Future Sight foil is close to $100. The Invocation or the Modern Masters foil, those are even close to $50. So this is another opportunity to get a hold of this card, but also get a hold of hopefully a cheaper foil. Totally Lost. This is a card that flavor-wise is very nostalgic. The art, a lot of folks remember the flavor text, the character within. So it is a nice inclusion here. And it's a good utility instant too. I mean, it's a common card, but an instant speed for 5 mana, being able to put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library is not bad at all. Hell's Caretaker. This is one of my personal favorite cards. I used to play with this thing all the time. Is it a great card by today's standards? Well, it's a 1/1 for 4, so probably not really. But if you can untap with this and limit it, I think you're going to be having a good time because you're going to be able to do some crazy shenanigans with some reanimation, and it could be really, really interesting. I really would like to pick this up maybe in a draft and try it out and see if I can pull it off. The fragility is going to be a problem, obviously, with lightning bolts running around and such, but you got to try to make this thing work. Also, I want to point out, too, they used the art from 9th edition, which that was the only time they used that particular piece of art, and back then it was still white border. So this is the first time you get this art in black border. Looks super sweet. I was actually surprised, too, at the value this card held. I thought it was probably just like a $2 card or something. If you go with the Chronicles version, they run about $2, $3, and that's saying something because Chronicles cards are really cheap. But if you go with the original Legends one, those will run you $15, $20. Even the 9th edition version will run you about $6, $7. I was a little surprised by that, so it's actually not a bad inclusion. Laquatus' Champion. This was actually the pre-release promo for Torment. This card hasn't been reprinted in paper, though, at all since it came out in Torment. It was in Vintage Masters on Magic Online, and I had a chance to play with it there. It actually was not a bad card, and considering that was a powerful environment, I'm looking forward to trying it out here as well. Triskaidekaphobia. This one's back, and again, this is another one of those cards that's nostalgic, probably more for flavor reasons than anything else. I love the art in this card and all the meticulous little details that are in it. The card itself, I tried to play a couple times in Limited, never really worked out for me, so I don't know how much of a playable card it truly is, unless you happen to get a little bit lucky. But I kind of understand why it's here, just because it is one of those very memorable cards, if nothing else. Fortune Thief. This is a red card with Morph, so we're starting to get a better picture of what they're doing with Morph. It's at least a sub-theme, if not a major theme, for the Izzet colors. And that could be fun to draft. Could be interesting. Now, Fortune Thief itself is a card. I think one of the main reasons it's here is because from a nostalgic point of view, it's reminiscent of Ali from Cairo, which of course is on the reserve list, so they can't put that in here. But I do think they missed the mark with some of that, because if you used to play back in the old days, Ali from Cairo probably is very nostalgic for you. But there probably aren't a lot of people that feel like Fortune Thief is truly a nostalgic card, honestly, because by the time this came out, it just wasn't that powerful. When Ali from Cairo came out, it was a very unique and actually strong card in its day. So I think some of this trying to call back a little bit to reserve list cards, especially some of these Time Spiral variants, I don't know if that's hitting the mark for nostalgia, unfortunately. There's other examples we've seen of that in the set as well, like Magus of the Wheel instead of Wheel of Fortune, Vesuvian Shapeshifter instead of Vesuvian Doppelganger. I got that right today. So, yeah, you can't bring the reserve list cards back, I get it, but I don't know if some of the newer versions quite have that same feel, unfortunately. Izzet Chemister. This is from Commander 2017, so not too old, not a very expensive card or anything. The art hasn't changed. There's nothing new about it for this version other than the watermark, of course. So, yeah, not a lot to say about this one. If you have enough instant sorcery targets in your limited deck, you'll be happy to play it. Kindle. This has never been reprinted in paper, believe it or not, since it was released in Tempest. So this is the first time you'll get a crack at a foil if you're interested. They use the same art. This is actually a decent direct damage spell, though, in Draft and Sealed. Even if you only have one and can't get multiples, Still very, very runnable. Even better, though, if you can grab a couple copies. Simian Spirit Guide. Finally, this thing gets a reprint from Planar Chaos. It did get bumped up from common to uncommon. I'm okay with that. I'm just happy to see this card. It sees extensive play in Modern, Legacy, Vintage, even Pauper. And it became a pretty expensive common at about $6, $7. Not to mention the fact, if you're thinking about picking up a foil, it would have run you about $65. So, very, very welcome inclusion here. Spike Shot Goblin. This has never been reprinted. It was from Mirrodin. It was a common there. It's been bumped up to uncommon, which is probably a good thing. Every once in a while you'll see these in Pauper, but really the story here is the fact that this card was almost backbreaking sometimes in Mirrodin Limited if you ever played it. Especially with all the equipment. It was easy to throw some equipment on this thing and it just became a powerhouse, right? And it was just almost unstoppable. You had to find an answer to it or you were losing the game, basically. Your creatures were getting blown up, then you were getting blown up, and it was just not a good day for you. They changed the art a little bit. I like the background of the art. The sky and everything looks kind of cool. I don't know, the goblin looks a little computer generated to me or something. Like the head looks too big. I don't know. But I've never seen a real goblin in real life, so maybe that's what they look like. So, I don't know. But anyway, cool inclusion. Glad it's in uncommon, though. Zadahedron Grinder. This one actually has been downgraded to uncommon. It's kind of hard to see in the picture. Trick Jared tweeted this out a little bit earlier. I'm starting to think Trick Jared may have a thing for the red jank. I've noticed that in some of the preview cards he's had in the past, too. So anyway, with this being downgraded to uncommon, it is a legendary uncommon. That's kind of unique and interesting. Here's what I like about the inclusion of this card, though. I mean, granted, it's not a high-value card or anything. We'll get that out of the way. But in this particular set, there's some powerful spells, like Giant Growth, for example. So let's say I'm playing some sort of Gruul Goblin deck or something, and I get a lot of small goblins, and looks like there's going to be some ways to do that from a couple of the cards we saw yesterday. And I play this, and then I can just simply attack with a bunch of my little goblins, Giant Growth this thing for just 1 green, and profit. I mean, right? Like, that's pretty awesome. So I think we're going to see more combos like that, especially as we see more of the set. It just feels like there's just a lot you can do with this card in a more powerful environment. So I don't know, it could be interesting. Ancient Stirrings, another previous common that really needed a reprint. It gets the bump up here to uncommon, much like Simian Spirit Guide did. But again, I'm okay with that because this card really needed a reprint. Fantastic in Tron decks and Pauper as well as Modern, not to mention other Modern decks too. This thing sees a lot of play. And it's another card that had value attached to it. I mean, for a common, it was $3, $4. And again, if you wanted a foil, not quite as extreme as the Spirit Guide, but they'll still run you about $35. Courser of Crewfix. You know, if you're going to pick a card from Born of the Gods, you can't really go wrong with Courser of Crewfix. This card's phenomenal, sees tons of modern play in all of the various collected company decks, some of the land destruction builds as well. It's just powerful. 2/4 creature, and those abilities are the real deal. And even though this card isn't super old, these will still run you $6, $7, so it's not a bad inclusion here at Rare. Elvish Piper. This is actually kind of interesting at Rare because it's a very popular casual card, and even though it's been reprinted a number of times at Rare, it always still holds some value. Like, this card will still run you like $6 to $8 depending on which version of it you pick up. So it's not a bad rare even in this day and age. Now, as far as the fragility of the card, kind of like Hell's Caretaker, that will be a problem. If you can untap with it, though, you're going to be having a pretty good day. And I do think they're going to put some big creatures in the set as a payoff for cards like Zombify, Hell's Caretaker, Elvish Piper, and could be kind of fun to try to work out and draft. Tree of Redemption. Okay, this one's a mythic, and yes, it is getting a lot of hate right now, and it's hard for me to defend it, honestly, because it's a very low value mythic. It's an okay card. It's probably good for you in limited. It just doesn't do anything exciting. It's a little bit more reactive, and I don't know. It's a little painful, granted, but I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm not too concerned about the mythic spots in sets like this. I'm more concerned about the rare and the uncommon spots. If you give me Tree of Redemption, but you give me Rashad Import, I'm going to be happy. So when you build a set like this, having some dud rares isn't make or break for me. There's a few really good ones, obviously, like everyone loved to open a foil Jace or something like that. Not so much a foil Tree of Redemption, probably. But that doesn't happen all that often, right? Like, that is not going to be the experience 99% of us are going to have when we crack these packs. Rares, however, good rare, some good uncommons, that's an experience that we're going to get more frequently. So, kind of is what it is. Don't have too much more to say about the card. Brian Stout Arm. Not a lot to say about this one. It's been printed a couple times. It's originally from Lorwyn. It's a good commander card. Actually has a lot of power behind it. It will be good for you in limited too, but it's not a very high value rare or anything, which I'm sure will disappoint some. Cloudblazer. This is one of the cards I was alluding to earlier that plays well with Cloud Shift. You know this from Kaladesh, and I actually had a lot of success in Kaladesh Limited with these things, so I'd be happy to try these out in a Masters Limited set, especially if I can flicker it. Mystic Snake. Not a lot of value here. The card's been reprinted a number of times. It is a very good limited card, though, if you ever played with it, especially in these blue-green decks where you're trying to be a little more controlling and put some pressure on the board and close out a game. It can be very fine for you. Notion Thief. This one's kind of interesting. Not a very high price card or anything like that for a rare. You can pick these things up for $1. But they do see a little bit of legacy play and a little bit of vintage play. And most recently, now that Jace has been unbanned, a lot of folks are trying them out in Modern. I have seen these in some Modern sideboards recently because they are a really good hose card for when somebody tries to use the 0 ability on Jace. It's actually really sweet if that happens. So I guess we'll kind of wait and see. It now has a reprint, so if the card was going to start to go up, this will keep it relatively stable, which I guess is a good thing. On the downside, though, it is another low-value rare right now. Pernicious Deed. This is actually a pretty good one. Value-wise, it's not the highest price card, but it's not anywhere near some of the lower price rares we've seen, about $5, $6. When it was reprinted in Conspiracy a few years back, it had stabilized a little bit. But this card has seen play ever since it was printed, basically, back in Apocalypse. Still sees play today in Legacy in a number of decks. Stangg. This is actually a funny reprint. This is originally from Legends. It did get a reprint in Chronicles. The Legends version, though, will run you about $17, $18. Chronicles one's pretty cheap. You can get that for just a couple bucks. But I do like the fact that this got brand new art, and it's finally got a token. You get the twin token there with the art, which actually looks pretty cool. So this is just a fun, quirky card. I'm glad they included it. It's at uncommon, too, so it's not even taking up a rare spot or anything like that. But it's one of the original Gold Legends. It's just kind of a fun thing to have in the set, I think. Watchwolf. They used the Friday Night Magic promo art for this, which I actually never looked at really closely before, but a lot of people had said this online, and I guess it kind of does. The art in the background looks more like Innistrad than Ravnica, so yeah, I guess it sort of does. But anyway, this is a very good card in limited. 3/3 for 2. Granted, 2 different colors, not always going to pan out, but if you can get this thing out in turn 2, turn 3, tons of value. Coalition Relic. Fantastic reprint here at Rare. Really happy to see this one. Huge staple for Commander. It was printed in Future Sight. It got a printing also in a dual deck. Now, those printings will run you about $11, $12 because the card is extremely popular, obviously, in Commander. If you wanted a foil, you're going to Future Sight. Those are going to run you $75, sometimes more. So getting another crack at this card is definitely a good thing. And I do think the foil of this particular art, this new art, will look sweet with that red background and the colors on the relic. I really would like to see that in person sometime. All right, with that being said, those are the cards for today. Now, my assumption is, because tomorrow's Friday, 2 weeks before the set drops, we will get the full set release. So they're going to probably give us the rest of the cards. I haven't heard anything official yet. That's usually what they do. If that's the case, we'll begin our full set review with the white cards tomorrow. If not, for some reason, we'll just do more previews. So I'll play it by ear. Saturday, we'll continue with set reviews, but we will also do our market watch and see how some of these previews have impacted the market. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.